The forest was eerily silent as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting long shadows across the leaf-strewn ground. A large, scarred mastiff with piercing amber eyes limped through the underbrush. His once muscular frame was gaunt from weeks without proper food. His ribs jutted out starkly against his matted coat, a testament to the harshness of his solitary survival driven by desperation. Hunter's senses were razor sharp. Every rustle of leaves, every faint movement ignited a flicker of hope that he might find something to ease the growing hunger in his belly. But so far the forest had been unforgiving as he trudged on a new scent. Caught his attention. It was faint at first, almost swallowed by the earthy smells of the woods, but it grew stronger with every step. It wasn't the scent of prey. It was different, foreign, yet unmistakably alive. Hunter paused, his ears twitching, his nostrils flaring as he tried to pinpoint the source. Then faintly he heard it. Sound so soft it might have been mistaken for the whisper of the wind. But it wasn't. It was a cry, high-pitched and plaintive, carrying a vulnerability that tugged at something buried deep within his primal instincts. Hunter moved cautiously, his powerful frame low to the ground. As he followed the sound, his amber eyes scanned the forest, every muscle coiled, ready for danger. The cries grew louder, more distinct, and soon he found himself standing at the edge of a small clearing. There, nestled awkwardly among the roots of a massive oak tree, was the source of the sound. The baby, the child, was wrapped in a tattered mudra blanket, its tiny fists flailing weakly as it wailed into the encroaching dusk. Hunter froze, his gaze locked on the infant. The sight of the child sent conflicting instincts racing through his mind. Hunger clawed at him mercilessly, urging him to turn away, to leave this fragile tree to its fate. But another instinct, a deeper, more inexplicable one, rooted him to the spot. Hunter took a cautious step forward, his massive paws crunching softly against the dry leaves. The baby's cries faltered as though sensing his presence. The dog's nose twitched as he sniffed the air, his head tilting slightly in curiosity. For a moment he stood motionless, his amber eyes wide with uncertainty. Then, against all odds, Hunter did something extraordinary. He lay down beside the baby, curling his body protectively around the tiny figure. The warmth of the infant's frail body against his own sparked something unfamiliar in Hunter, something that felt almost like purpose. He let out a low, comforting whine, his hunger momentarily forgotten. The once feral dog, shaped by years of fighting and survival, had chosen to guard the most vulnerable creature he'd ever encountered. As the night deepened, forest grew colder. A biting wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the distant howls of unseen predators. Hunter, despite his exhaustion, remained vigilant. His body formed a shield around the baby, blocking the chill of the night. The child's cries had quieted, reduced to soft whimpers, its tiny chest rising and falling with fragile breaths. Hunter's amber eyes scanned the darkness, his ears twitching at every sound. He knew the forest was unforgiving, an endless expanse where the strong survived and the weak perished. But tonight something was different. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was protecting something far more fragile than himself. The baby stirred, letting out a faint sound, and Hunter lowered his massive head to sniff at the bundle. The child's scent was strange, but not unpleasant, a mixture of earth, cloth, and innocence. His nose nudged the blanket closer. Around the infant, an action born not of understanding but of instinct. The deep primal urge to protect overrode his hunger, his fatigue, and his pain. As the hours passed, the night brought new challenges. A rustle in the nearby bushes caused Hunter's ears to perk up, his body stiffening, his lips curled into a silent snarl as he positioned himself in front of the baby, ready to confront whatever emerged from the shadows. A pair of glowing eyes appeared, followed by the low guttural growl of a wolf. Then another set of eyes, and another. A small pack of wolves had surrounded the clearing, their movements cautious but predatory. Hunter stood his ground, his growls growing louder, his body a barrier between the baby and the threat. The wolves circled, testing his resolve. But Hunter's stance didn't waver. He knew he was outnumbered, his weakened body no match for the pack, yet he refused to back down. One wolf lunged its teeth, aiming for Hunter's flank with a ferocity. Hunter twisted, meeting the attack ahead. His powerful jaws clamped down on the wolf's shoulder, forcing it to retreat with a yelp. Another wolf darted in this time from the side, but Hunter swiped at it with his massive paw, sending it tumbling into the underbrush. The fight was brutal, and Swift Hunter's body was a blur of movement as he defended his fragile charge. Blood stained his fur, his breathing grew ragged, and his legs trembled with the effort of keeping the pack at bay. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, the wolves relented one by one. They disappeared into the forest, their glowing eyes vanishing like fireflies extinguished in the dark. Hunter stood, panting, his body covered in scratches and bites, his head hung low, his muscles quivering, but his resolve remained unbroken. He turned back to the baby, and who was miraculously unharmed, its small face peeking out from the blanket. Hunter nudged the infant gently, his warm breath brushing against its tiny cheek. The baby stirred, letting out a soft sound that seemed almost like gratitude. The night pressed on, but the bond between the dog and the child grew stronger. Hunter knew they couldn't stay in the open. He had to find shelter somewhere, safe where he could protect the baby without constant threats looming over them. With a low whine, Hunter carefully gripped the edge of the baby's blanket in his teeth, lifting the infant as gently as he could. Every step was deliberate as he moved through the dense forest, his body battered but his spirit unyielding. The faint scent of water reached his nose, and he followed it, hoping to find a place where they could rest and recover. The forest opened up to a small stream, its clear water glistening under the moonlight. Hunter set the baby down on a soft patch of moss, his eyes scanning the surroundings for danger. He dipped his head into the stream, drinking deeply to quench his thirst once he'd had his fill. He returned to the baby, nudging its blanket closer to the water's edge. Hunter lapped at the water with his tongue, wetting the child's lips in the hopes of reviving it. The baby stirred weakly, its tiny hand twitching as it sensed the cool moisture. Hunter let out a soft, contented whine against all odds. The baby was holding on. The stream provided a momentary reprieve, but Hunter knew they couldn't stay long. The forest was no place for the vulnerable. He scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes catching sight of a crumbling structure in the distance, a cabin half hidden by vines and shadows. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. With renewed determination, Hunter picked up the baby once more and started toward it, his steps slow but steady. Hunter's journey to the cabin was grueling. The baby's tiny weight was inconsequential compared to the injuries riddling his body, but the burden he carried wasn't physical. It was the crushing responsibility to keep this fragile life safe. Each step through the dense forest felt heavier than the last. The wind rustled the branches above, and the distant calls of owls echoed through the darkness. But Hunter pressed on. When they finally reached the cabin, it was a pitiful sight. The roof sagged for years of neglect, and the walls were weathered and cracked. Broken windows allowed the moonlight to spill through, painting the dilapidated structure in eerie silver streaks. To Hunter, it wasn't a ruin, it was a sanctuary. He pushed the cabin door open with his nose, the old wood creaking loudly in protest. Inside, the air was stale but dry, and the ground was covered in a layer of dust and debris. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Hunter stepped carefully over the threshold, his paws leaving faint prints in the dust as he moved to a corner of the room that seemed sheltered from the drafts. Gently, he set the baby down on a patch of dry earth, nudging the blanket. To ensure the child was warm, the infant stirred slightly, its small fingers curling around the edge of the fabric. Hunter watched intently, his amber eyes softening at the sight. For a moment, he allowed himself to rest, lowering his body to the ground and wrapping himself protectively around the baby. His breathing slowed, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, lulling the child into a peaceful slumber. But Hunter's rest was short-lived. His ears twitched at the faint sound of movement outside, a rustling that didn't belong to the wind. He rose slowly, his body tense as his keen senses searched for the S of the disturbance. The forest had quieted, an unnatural stillness settling over the night. Suddenly a low growl rumbled through the cabin. Hunter's hackles rose, and his muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. Peering through the broken window, he caught sight of movement, glowing eyes. Reflecting the moonlight wolves again, their scent reached him. Sharp and musky, mingling with the damp earth the pack hadn't given up, they had followed him. Each positioned himself between the baby and the approaching threat, his massive frame a living barrier. The wolves circled the cabin, their silhouettes flickering in and out of the shadows like phantoms. One of them stepped closer, its fangs beat and its eyes fixed on the bundle of blankets behind Hunter. The primal urge to protect surged through him stronger than his pain, stronger than his exhaustion. The lead wolf lunged, its jaws snapping just inches from Hunter's face. He countered with a ferocious snarl, his powerful jaws clamping down on the wolf's shoulder and tossing it aside. Another wolf darted in from the side, aiming for his flank, but Hunter twisted, landing a solid blow that sent it skidding across the floor. Despite his injuries, he fought with the ferocity of a creature defending not just its own life but something far more precious. The battle was chaos growls, yelps, and the sound of bodies colliding filled the small cabin. Dust and debris swirled in the air, illuminated by the pale moonlight streaming through the windows. Hunter was outnumbered, his strength waning with every attack. He repelled, but his resolve never faltered. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the wolves retreated, blooded and limping. They disappeared into the forest, their glowing eyes vanishing like fading embers. Hunter stood in the middle of the cabin, his body trembling and his breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood matted his fur, and every muscle in his body screamed for rest. But his first thought was for the baby. He turned and limped toward the child, his heart racing as he nudged the blanket with his nose. The baby was unharmed, its small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Hunter let out a soft, relieved whine. Lowering himself beside the infant, once more he curled his body around the child, his protective instinct still on high alert. Despite his exhaustion, the cabin was silent again, save for the gentle sound of the baby's breathing and the occasional creak of the old wooden beams. Hunter closed his eyes, his ears still twitching at every sound, his body too tense to fully relax. He knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The forest was relentless, and the safety of the cabin wouldn't last forever. But for now, they were alive, and that was enough. As dawn began to break, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the broken windows, casting a golden glow over the small room. Hunter stirred, his body aching as he R-R'd to his feet. The baby shifted in its sleep, its tiny hands reaching toward the warmth of the morning light. Hunter watched silently, his amber eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. He knew their journey wasn't over. The forest would not forgive weakness, and the baby needed more than his protection to survive. They needed food, water, and a safe place to stay, a home where the child could thrive and grow. Hunter's resolve hardened. He would find it. No matter what it took. Hunter's body protested with every step as he ventured out of the cabin that morning. The soft rays of sunlight filtering through the trees did little to ease the exhaustion weighing him down. He had to find food and water, not just for himself but for the fragile life he had vowed to protect. The baby had stirred softly as he left, its tiny whimpers piercing through the otherwise serene morning. Despite his reluctance, he knew he couldn't stay inside the cabin forever, ever. The forest seemed calmer in the daylight, but Hunter remained on edge. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of a bird sent his instincts into overdrive. His nose worked overtime, scanning the air for any sign of water or prey. The faint scent of moisture led him further into the woods, his paws leaving faint prints in the damp earth. The sun was rising higher, its warmth brushing against his fur, but his mind remained focused on survival. Finally, he came upon a small stream trickling through a cluster of moss-covered rocks. The sound of running water was a balm to his frayed nerves. Hunter approached cautiously, his ears swiveling to catch any sign of danger. After ensuring the area was clear, he lapped at the cool water, the relief instant, as it soothed his dry throat. His body sagged slightly, the weight of exhaustion temporarily lifting. But his reprieve was short-lived as he drank. Hunter's nose caught an unfamiliar scent on the breeze. It was faint but distinct, something metallic and acrid, mingling with the earthy aroma of the forest. His ears flattened and he raised his head scanning the area. The scent was getting stronger, pulling him away from the stream and deeper into the underbrush. His steps were cautious, his muscles coiled, ready for anything. The sight that greeted him made his heart race. Scattered across the forest floor were pieces of fabric, torn and dirty but unmistakably human. Nearby, a makeshift campsite lay abandoned, the ashes of a once roaring fire smoldering faintly. The metallic scent that had drawn him here was stronger now, and as he approached, he realized it sourced blood. Hunter's nose twitched as he picked up the scent of multiple humans, but no one was inside. His hackles rose and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Something had happened here. Something. Violent. The ground was disturbed, footprints and claw marks crisscrossing the area in chaotic patterns. Hunter sniffed around his mind, piecing together the story. There had been a struggle, and it hadn't ended well. He caught the faint scent of predators. Wolves perhaps, or something larger. His gaze flickered to the edges of the clearing, half expecting glowing eyes to appear from the shadows. The realization hit him hard. This could have been the baby's fate if he hadn't stumbled upon the child. It might have been left to fend for itself against the harshness of the forest. Hunter's resolve deepened. He couldn't let that happen, not to the baby, not to anyone. He searched the campsite thoroughly, hoping to find something, anything that could aid them among the wreckage. He found a small satchel. Its contents had spilled out, but Hunter nosed through the debris carefully. There were scraps of food, stale but edible, and a metal flask that still held a few drops of water. He carried the satchel back toward the cabin, his steps quicker, now his mind racing with urgency. When Hunter returned, the baby was awake, its tiny cries filling the cabin. He approached cautiously, nudging the satchel toward the child before settling beside it. The baby's cries softened as Hunter lay down, his warm body providing comfort. He nudged the flask closer, tilting it slightly to let a few drops of water wet the baby's lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. As the day stretched on, Hunter remained vigilant. The memory of the abandoned campsite haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had caused such destruction might still be out there. His ears twitched at every sound, his eyes scanning the forest beyond the cabin's broken windows. The baby rested against his side, its fragile breaths steady and calm. By nightfall, the forest seemed to come alive again. The distant howls of wolves echoed through the trees. Hunter's body tensed instinctively. He stood positioning himself near the cabin door, his sharp eyes fixed on the darkness outside. He wouldn't let anything harm the child, not while he was still breathing. The wolves were close, their presence a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond the safety of the cabin. But Hunter's determination burned. Brighter than his fear, he let out a low growl of warning to the unseen predators that this place was off limits. The baby stirred behind him, and he glanced back, his heart swelling with a protective instinct so powerful it overrode every other thought. For now, the cabin was their haven, but Hunter knew it wouldn't be enough. The forest was merciless and survival meant constant vigilance. He would need to find a permanent solution, a place where the baby could grow safely, far from the claws and teeth of predators. Hunter's amber eyes gleamed in the dim light of the cabin as he stood guard through the night, the weight of his new purpose settling over him. He had faced countless battles before, but this was different. This wasn't just survival. This was hope, fragile but undeniable, and he would fight for it with everything he had. The night deepened and the forest fell into an uneasy silence. Hunter remained by the cabin, nor his large frame silhouetted against the faint moonlight that seeped through the cracks in the weathered wood. The baby was finally asleep, with small breaths, a soothing rhythm in the otherwise tense atmosphere. But Hunter's ears remained alert, picking at every distant sound. The memory of the abandoned campsite gnawed at his thoughts. Whatever had caused the destruction out there wasn't far away. Then he heard it, a soft rustling in the underbrush. It was faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the breeze stirring the leaves, but it grew louder, more deliberate. Hunter's body tensed, his amber eyes narrowing as he focused on the direction of the sound his nose caught. The scent before his eyes could confirm it. Wolves, multiple wolves, they were close, their musky odor mingling with the damp earth. Hunter let out a low growl, his lips curling back to expose sharp teeth. The baby stood behind him but didn't wait, the soft rise and fall of its tiny chest, a reminder of what was at stake. He turned briefly, glancing at the fragile bundle nestled in the corner. He couldn't let them get inside. The cabin was their only protection, and he was its only guardian. The first wolf appeared at the edge of the clearing, its glowing eyes reflecting the faint light of the moon. It was large, its fur dark and matted with a lean frame that spoke of hunger. Another followed, then another, their movements stealthy and coordinated. Hunter stepped forward, his growl deepening into a warning rumble that echoed through the still air. The wolves paused, their predatory eyes fixed on him for a moment. It seemed as though they were testing him, gauging whether he was a threat or an opportunity. Then the largest of the pack stepped forward, its ears flattening as it beat its teeth in a silent snarl. Hunter stood his ground, his body low and braced, every muscle ready to spring into action. The lead wolf lunged first, its movements swift and precise. Hunter met it head on, their bodies colliding with a force that reverberated. Through the ground, his powerful jaws snapped down on the wolf's shoulder, eliciting a yelp of pain. But another wolf darted in from the side, its teeth grazing his hind leg. Hunter twisted, using his massive frame to throw the second attacker off balance. The fight was chaotic, a blur of snarls, teeth, and claws. Hunter moved with the ferocity born of desperation, his singular focus on keeping the wolves away from the baby. He landed a powerful blow on one wolf, sending it skidding across the clearing, but the others were relentless. They circled him, their growls, a menacing chorus that seemed to vibrate through the night. Blood stained the ground, the metallic scent mingling with the earthy aroma of the forest edge. His muscles burned, and his breath came in ragged gasps, but he didn't falter. One wolf tried to dart past him, heading for the cabin door, but Hunter intercepted it, slamming his body into the predator and forcing it back. His protective instincts overrode every ounce of pain, and exhaustion, the baby, was his priority. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the wolves began to retreat, their leader battered and limping, let out a guttural snarl before turning and disappearing into the shadows one by one. The others followed, their glowing eyes fading into the darkness. Hunter stood in the clearing, his chest heaving, blood matting his fur. His body screamed for rest, but he remained vigilant, his ears straining for any sound that might signal their return. The forest fell silent once more, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Hunter limped back to the cabin, his movement slow and labored. He pushed the door open gently, his eyes immediately seeking out the baby. It was still asleep, its tiny form curled within the folds of the blanket. Hunter's body relaxed, slightly relief washing over him like a tide. He rolled himself onto the ground beside the child, his body curling protectively around it. Every movement sent jolts of pain through him, but he ignored it. His duty wasn't over, not yet. As he rested his head on his baby, his eyes remained fixed on the door, his ears alert for any sign of danger. He could afford to let his guard down, not even for a moment. The baby stirred in its sleep, a faint whimper escaping its lips. Hunter nudged it gently with his nose, his warm breath calming the child back into a peaceful slumber. The night stretched on, and though his body ached and his wounds throbbed, Hunter refused to close his eyes. The baby was safe for now, but he knew the wolves would be back as dawn began to break, casting soft light across the forest. Hunter finally allowed himself to relax slightly. The fight had left him battered and exhausted, but he had protected the baby. That was all that mattered. The sunlight, filtering through the cracks in the cabin's walls, brought a fleeting sense of peace, a reminder that they had survived another night. But Hunter knew this was only the beginning. The wolves weren't the only danger lurking in the forest, and the baby's cries could easily attract more predators. He needed a plan, a way to ensure their safety beyond the fragile walls of the cabin. His amber eyes gleamed with determination as he glanced at the sleeping child. No matter what lay ahead, he would protect it together. They would survive. The morning sun bathed the forest in a soft golden light, but the tranquility was deceptive. Hunter stirred his battered body, aching from the fight. His fur was matted with dried blood, and every movement sent sharp jolts of pain through his muscles. Despite his exhaustion, he rose to his feet, his amber eyes scanning the cabin for signs of disturbance. The baby was still there, nestled in its blanket, its small chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Hunter moved toward the door, his movements slow but deliberate. He poked his nose outside, sniffing the cool morning air for any trace of the wolves. The faint metallic tang of blood lingered, but the predators were gone for now. Still, his instincts told him he couldn't stay here. The cabin offered some protection, but it was exposed, vulnerable if the wolves returned with greater numbers, or if other dangers appeared. Hunter wouldn't be able to fend them off again. He turned back to the baby, nudging it gently with his nose. The child stirred its tiny hands, reaching out instinctively. For warmth, Hunter gave a soft huff, a sound of reassurance, and before retreating to the door, he needed to find food and water, not just for himself, but for the baby as well. His strength was waning, and his protective instincts could only carry him so far outside the cabin. The forest seemed to hum with live. Birds called to one another from the treetops, and the underbrush rustled with the movements of small animals. But Hunter paid them no mind. His focus was on survival, on finding the essentials that would keep them both alive. He ventured a short distance from the cabin, his ears constantly swiveling for signs of danger. The forest floor was littered with fallen leaves and broken branches, and every step felt like a reminder of how fragile their situation was. Hunter's keen nose picked up the scent of water, faint but unmistakable. He followed it cautiously, moving through the dense trees, until he came upon a small stream. The clear water sparkled in the sunlight, and Hunter approached it with care, his ears twitching at every sound he drank deeply, the cold liquid soothing his parched throat and restoring a fraction of his strength. Once he was satisfied, he glanced back in the direction of the cabin. The baby would need water too, but how could he bring it back? He scanned the area, his eyes falling on a discarded plastic bottle tangled in the roots of a nearby tree. The sight stirred something in his memory, a distant recollection of humans and their strange tools. Hunter padded over to the bottle, picking it up carefully in his jaws. The plastic crinkled under his teeth, but it held together. He filled it at the stream, tilting his head to ensure it wouldn't spill, and began the careful trek back to the cabin. When he returned, the baby was awake, its soft cries filling the small space. Hunter hurried to its side, setting the bottle down and nudging the blanket with his nose. The child's tiny fists flayed, its face crunched in distress. Hunter whined softly, unsure of how to soothe it. He licked its cheek. The gesture gentle and instinctive, and the baby's cries quieted to small whimpers. Hunter tipped the bottle slightly, letting a few drops of water fall onto the child's lips. The baby responded, its mouth moving instinctively too. Drink relief washed over Hunter as he watched his protective instincts reaffirm. But this was only a temporary solution. They needed more than water. They needed food, shelter, and a plan. The sound of rustling leaves outside the cabin snapped Hunter to attention. His ears perked and his body tensed as he moved to the door. He sniffed the air, his heart pounding at the familiar scent. Wolves. They hadn't given up. Hunter growled low in his throat, his body blocking the doorway as his eyes scanned the forest for movement. The wolves were smarter this time, staying hidden among the trees. Hunter could feel their presence, their watchful eyes tracking his every move. They were waiting, testing his resolve. He knew he couldn't let them linger. If they attacked again, his weakened state would leave him at a severe disadvantage. He turned back to the baby, nudging it gently. The child's eyes were wide, as if sensing the tension. Hunter knew he had to act quickly. Staying in the cabin was no longer an option. They needed to move to find a safer place where the wolves couldn't follow. But the journey would be dangerous, especially with his injuries slowing him down. Hunter carefully picked up the baby in its blanket, cradling it gently in his jaws. He stepped outside, his eyes darting to the shadows where the wolves lurked. A low growl rumbled in his throat as he took the first cautious step away from the cabin. Wolves didn't move, but Hunter could feel their presence pressing against him. Like a physical weight, the forest closed in around them as Hunter moved his pace slow but steady. The baby's warmth against his chest gave him strength, a reminder of why he couldn't give up every step. Felt like a battle, his injured leg protesting with each movement, but he pressed on his ears, constantly swiveling for sounds of pursuit. The wolves followed at a distance, their silent presence a constant threat. Hunter's mind raced, searching for a solution. He needed to find higher ground, a defensible position where he could protect the baby if the wolves attacked again. His amber eyes scanned the forest, seeking anything that might offer an advantage. Finally, he spotted a rocky outcrop rising above the dense underbrush. It wasn't much, but it was elevated and surrounded by steep inclines. If he could reach it, he could keep the wolves at bay. Hunter adjusted his grip on the baby and began the climb, his claws scraping against the rough stone as he pulled himself upward. The wolves didn't wait long to react. Their snarls echoed through the forest as they broke from the shadows they lived for. Darting toward the outcrop, Hunter growled, his pace quickening. Despite the pain shooting through his limbs, he reached the top just as the first wolf plunged its jaws, snapping inches from his ear. Hunter turned sharply, his body a wall of muscle and determination as he faced the pack. The baby was behind him, safe for now, but the fight was far from over. He let out a fierce bark, the sound reverberating through the forest like a thunderclap. The wolves hesitated, their movements uncertain as they assessed the challenge before them. Hunter knew this was his moment to act. He couldn't afford to let the wolves gain the upper hand. His protective instincts flared, overriding his exhaustion as he prepared to defend the baby. Once more, Hunter braced himself, his muscular frame shielding the baby from view. As the wolves advanced, their eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger, their movements calculated as they spread out in a semicircle, cutting off any escape routes. The lead wolf, larger than the others, with a patch of silver streaking its fur, let out a low growl, a sound that sent shivers through the forest. Hunter didn't flinch despite his injuries. His protective instinct surged to the forefront, sharpening his senses and steadying his resolve. He let out a guttural snarl, his lips pulling back to reveal sharp teeth. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the tiny life depending on him. The first wolf lunged, its teeth snapping toward Hunter's throat. He twisted his body, deflecting the attack. With a powerful shove of his shoulder, the wolf stumbled but quickly recovered, circling back to join the others. A second wolf darted in from the side, aiming for Hunter's flank. He reacted with lightning speed, his jaws closing around the wolf's scruff and tossing it aside. The yelp of pain echoed through the forest, but the pack wasn't deterred. The lead wolf took a step forward, its eyes locking onto Hunter's. For a moment there was a silent exchange, a battle of wills. Then, as if on an unspoken signal, the pack attacked in unison. Hunter met them head-on, his powerful body moving with a grace and precision born of years of survival. Teeth clashed, growls filled the air, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. One wolf managed to clamp its jaws onto Hunter's hind leg, but he twisted violently, throwing it off before it could do serious damage. Another wolf leapt for his throat, but Hunter ducked and countered his heel, sinking into the wolf's shoulder. Despite his fierce defense, the numbers began to take their toll. Hunter's movements grew slower, his breaths more labored, blood matted. His fur and his legs trembled under the strain. But every time the wolves came close to the baby, he found a surge of strength, a reason to keep fighting. The baby, oblivious to the danger, let out a soft cry from behind behind him, the sound seemed to pierce the chaos. Momentarily halting the wolf's assault, Hunter used a brief pause to reposition himself, placing the baby in a shallow crevice in the rock where it would be harder for the wolves to reach. He turned back to the pack, his growl deepening as he prepared for another round. The lead wolf growled a command, and the pack advanced again more cautiously. This time they had underestimated Hunter's determination, but they were relentless. The lead wolf lunged its jaws, snapping dangerously close to Hunter's face. He dodged, his movement slower but still precise, and countered with a powerful swipe of his paw. The wolf yelled, blood staining its silver fur, but it didn't back down. The fight raged on each moment, a test of Hunter's endurance. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. His vision blurred, his muscles screamed in protest, and his breath came in ragged gasps, but he refused to falter. Every growl, every bite, every step was a declaration the baby would survive, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos, the faint crunch of footsteps on the forest floor. Hunter's ears perked, his body tense as he strained to identify the source. The wolves hesitated, their ears flicking toward the noise. It grew louder, closer, and Hunter caught a whiff of something that made his heart race. A human scent. Out of the dense underbrush emerged a figure, a man with a weathered face and a rifle slung over his shoulder. His eyes widened at the scene before him. A scarred, blooded dog standing defiantly between a pack of wolves and what appeared to be a baby hidden in the rocks. The man raised his rifle, aiming it skyward. A deafening shot rang out, the sound reverberating through the forest like a clap of thunder. The wolves rose their ears, flattening in alarm. Another shot followed, and the pack began to retreat, their snarls fading as they melted back into the shadows of the trees. Hunter stood his ground, his chest heaving as he watched the wolves disappear. The man approached slowly, his rifle lowered but his posture cautious. Hunter growled low in his throat, his body still coiled with tension. He didn't trust humans, not after everything he had endured, but he also knew he couldn't protect the baby alone much longer. The man stopped a few feet away, his eyes softening as he took in the scene. Easy boy, he said, his voice calm and steady. I'm not here to hurt you. Hunter's growl faded slightly, though he kept his stance defensive. The man knelt, setting his rifle aside. As he extended a hand, you've been through a lot, haven't you? He murmured, but you did good, you kept that little one safe. Hunter sniffed the air, his nose twitching as he picked up the man's scent. There was no malice in it, only concern. Slowly, cautiously, Hunter stepped back, allowing the man to approach the crevice where the baby lay. The man reached in carefully, his hands gentle as he lifted the child into his arms. The baby stood, his cries quieting as it nestled against him. You're a hero, you know that, the man said, glancing at Hunter. You saved this baby's life. Hunter lowered his head, exhaustion finally overtaking him. His legs buckled and he sank to the ground, his body trembling with fatigue. The man moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on his head. Come on, boy, he said softly. Let's get you both somewhere safe. As the man carried the baby toward the edge of the forest, Hunter forced himself to his feet, his body swaying, but his resolve unbroken. He followed the steps unsteady, but determined. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they were finally safe. The man led the way through the dense forest, his arms cradling the baby as he glanced back to ensure Hunter was following the dog's steps. It was slow and labored, each movement a testament to his sheer willpower. Blood strayed, his fur and his breathing were shallow, but his eyes never left the man and the baby. Protecting the child had become his singular purpose, and he wasn't ready to abandon it. Now hang in there, boy, the man said, his voice low and steady. We almost there. The trees began to thin, revealing the faint outline of a cabin. Nestled in a small clearing, smoke curled from the chimney, the scent of burning wood mingling with the cool forest air. The sight stirred a flicker of relief in Hunter. Though his body remained tense, he had spent too many years on guard, too many days fighting to survive, to let his defenses down now. The man pushed open the cabin door with his shoulder, stepping inside. An immediate immediately setting the baby on a worn but clean blanket spread across a couch. The room was simple yet warm, with the soft glow of a fire casting flickering shadows on the walls. Hunter hesitated at the threshold, his body rigid as his eyes scanned the space for potential threats. "Come on in," the man urged, motioning with his hand. "You're safe." Hunter's paw faltered on the wooden steps, his instincts urging caution, even as his body begged for rest finally, as if sensing the sincerity in the man's tone. He stepped inside, the warmth of the fire washed over him, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, his muscles began to relax. The man knelt in front of him, his eyes filled with a mix of awe and concern. "You're a mess, buddy," he said, softly reaching for a first aid kit on a nearby shelf. Hunter flinched at the movement, a low growl rumbling in his throat. The man paused, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay, I'm just going to help." Hunter watched him wearily, his body taut with tension. But when the man moved slowly, carefully opening the kit and pulling out a clean cloth, Hunter allowed him to approach. The man dabbed at the wounds on Hunter's shoulder, his touch gentle yet firm. The dog winced, but didn't pull away, his eyes locked on the baby resting on the couch. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" the man murmured, his voice more to himself than to Hunter, but he didn't give up. "You saved that little one." Hunter's ears twitched at the man's words, the gentle tone unfamiliar but strangely comforting. He lowered his head, his eyes closing briefly as exhaustion and weighting down. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper that broke the quiet. Hunter's head shot up, his body tensing as his gaze snapped. "To the child," the man chuckled, "softly relax, boy, I've got it." He moved to the couch, lifting the baby into his arms and cradling it close. The sight of the tiny, fragile life in his care stirred something deep within Hunter. A protective instinct so strong it overshadowed his exhaustion. He rose to his feet, his legs trembling as he stepped closer to the man and the baby. "You're not letting your guard down, are you?" the man said, a small smile touching him. His lips, "Well, I can't blame you. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this." The man set the baby down, carefully wrapping it in a thicker blanket before turning back to Hunter. "Let me see if I can find you something to eat," he said, moving toward a small kitchen area. Hunter's ears perked at the word eat, but he didn't move, his eyes fixed on the baby, as if afraid it might disappear if he looked away. The man rummaged through a cupboard, eventually pulling out a can of dog food and a bowl. He set the bowl on the floor and opened the can, the scent of food wafting through the room. "Here you go," he said, placing the food within reach. "Are you earned?" This Hunter hesitated, his instinct still wary despite the gnawing hunger in his stomach. Finally, he stepped forward, lowering his head to sniff the food. It wasn't much, but it was enough to quiet the ache in his gut. He ate slowly, his ears flicking at every sound, his gaze darting between the man and the baby. As the hours passed, the tension in the cabin began to ease. The man moved carefully, respecting Hunter's space, while keeping the fire stoked and the baby warm. Hunter, though still watchful, allowed himself to lie down near the couch, his body curled protectively around the baby's makeshift bed. His eyes never closed fully, his ears reaching at every creak and groan of the old wooden structure. The man settled into a chair nearby, his eyes heavy with thought as he watched the unlikely pair. "You're not just any dog, are you?" he said quietly, his voice breaking. "The silence, you've got more fight in you than most people I've known." Hunter didn't react, his focus remaining on the baby, but the man's words lingered in the warm air, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of another cold night. But inside the cabin there was warm safety and the fragile beginnings of trust. Hunter's body began to relax, his breathing steadying as the fire crackled softly in the hearth. For the first time in days, there was peace, a fleeting but precious moment of calm in the chaos of their journey. And as the baby's tiny hand twitched in sleep, Hunter let out a low, contented sigh, his heart swelling with a feeling he hadn't known in years. Hope the morning light filtered through the cracks in the cabin's wooden walls, casting streaks of pale gold across the room. Hunter's eyes blinked open, his ears flicking at the faint rustling sound outside. The warmth of the fire had dwindled to glowing embers, and the room was quiet except for the soft breathing of the baby. Bundled tightly on the couch, the man stirred in his chair, groaning softly as he stretched his eyes, met Hunter's, and he offered a small, weary smile. Morning, buddy. Seems like we made it through the night. Hunter didn't move from his spot, his body still curled protectively near the baby. The scent of the man, the baby, and the faint traces of smoke from the dying fire filled the air for the first time in days. Hunter's senses weren't overwhelmed by danger or fear yet. As he sniffed the faint breeze coming through the gaps in the walls, his body tensed. Something was out there. The man noticed Hunter's sudden alertness, ears now standing upright, and his eyes locked on the cabin door. "What is it?" he asked, quietly rising from his chair. He moved to the window, peering out into the clearing. At first he saw nothing, just the trees swaying gently in the wind, their branches casting long shadows on the frosted ground. Then he spotted a movement in the distance, a shape darting between the trees, quick and low to the ground. The man's heart quickened. "Hunter," he whispered, his voice tense. The dog's low growl confirmed his suspicions. The shape emerged from the tree line, followed by another, and then a third wolf's. Their sleek bodies moved with eerie coordination, their noses pointed toward the cabin. Hunter rose to his feet, his muscles taut as he positioned himself between the door and the baby. The man stepped back from the window, his mind racing. He grabbed a piece of firewood from the pile near the hearth, gripping it tightly as he looked at Hunter. "Looks like we've got company," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Stay close." The wolves circled the clearing, their sharp eyes scanning the cabin. They moved with the precision of predators, their hunger evident in the way their tongues flicked over. Yet one of them let out a low guttural growl, and the others followed suit, their snarls reverberating through the quiet morning air. Hunter growled back, his teeth bared as he took a step forward. The man placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping. "Easy boy, let's not rush into this." The baby whispered softly, breaking the tension in the room. For a brief moment, Hunter glanced back, his protective instincts flaring. He let out a sharp bark, a warning. That's he echoed through the cabin and beyond. The wolves rose, their ears twitching at the sound. The man took a deep breath, his mind working quickly. He couldn't let the wolves get too close. Not with the baby and Hunter both in vulnerable states. He knelt by the fire, grabbing a half-burned log and blowing on the embers until they flared to life. The sudden burst of light and smoke caused the wolves to hesitate, their movements faltering as they watched. The cabin intently. "I got an idea," the man muttered, glancing at Hunter, "but you're going to need to hold the monk if this doesn't work." Hunter didn't look away from the door. His growl seemed unrelated. The man grabbed a can from the kitchen shelf and tossed in a handful of nails and screws, the clattering sound loud and jarring. He placed it in the fire, the metal heating rapidly as sparks began to pop and crackle outside. The wolves inched closer, their hunger driving them toward the cabin. The lead wolf, a large silver-furred beast with piercing yellow eyes, stepped into the clearing. Its posture dominant and unafraid, it let out a sharp bark, and the others began to fan out, their eyes locked on the small wooden structure. Hunter lunged forward, barking ferociously, his body pressed against the door as if daring them to try. The wolves hesitated, clearly unnerved by his presence, but the lead wolf didn't waver. It took another step forward, its muscles rippling as it prepared to attack. The man grabbed the now red-hot green can with a thick cloth, its contents rattling ominously. He hurled it out the door, the can spinning through the air before landing with a loud clang. It exploded on impact, the heated nails scattering in every direction and sending up a plume of smoke. Ash, the wolf yucked their formation, breaking as they scrambled to avoid the unexpected attack. The wolf snarled, its eyes narrowing at the cabin. But even it seemed reluctant to advance. The scent of burning metal and smoke betraying its predatory instincts. Hunter barked again, his body pressed against the door as he pushed it closed with his weight. The man quickly secured the lock, both of them breathing heavily as they listened for any signs of retreat outside. The wolves lingered at the edge of the clearing, their eyes glowing in the shadows, but one by one they began to back away, their growls fading into the distance. The big wolf was the last to leave his gaze, lingering on the cabin before it turned and disappeared into the trees. The man slumped against the wall, his grip on the firewood loosening that was. Close, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked down at Hunter, whose body was still tense and ready. "You okay, boy?" Hunter's gaze remained fixed on the door, his breathing heavy but controlled after a long moment. He turned and walked back to the couch, his eyes softening as he checked on the baby. The child's whimpering had stopped, replaced by a soft, steady breathing that seemed to calm Hunter's nerves. The man knelt beside them, his hand resting on Hunter's head. "You did good," he said softly. "We both did." The cabin fell silent once more, the faint scent of smoke lingering in the air. For now they were safe, but both man and dog knew the dangers outside hadn't disappeared. Completely together they had to be ready for whatever came next. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet as the morning light grew stronger, spilling through the broken windows in golden streaks. Hunter lay by the baby in his ears, freaking at every creak and rustle. His body was still tense, the adrenaline of the encounter with the wolf slowly ebbing away. The man sat in the corner, his head in his hands, processing the events for the moment. They were safe, but the weight of what had just transpired lingered heavily in the air. The baby stirred its tiny hand, escaping the blanket and grasping at the empty air. Hunter immediately nudged the blanket closer, with his nose tucking it gently around the child. The man watched in quiet awe, the dog's instincts as a protector shining through. "Yet again you're incredible, you know that," the man said softly, his voice breaking the silence. Hunter's ears twitched, but he didn't look up. His focus entirely on the baby outside. The forest seemed eerily still. The wolves were gone, but the man knew better than to trust the silence. Predators often lingered, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. He stood and began to move around the cabin, checking every corner for weaknesses. The door was flimsy and the walls weren't much better. If the wolves returned, it would be difficult to keep them out. "We can't stay here forever," he murmured, more to himself than to Hunter. "We need to find a safer place somewhere with real shelter." Hunter finally looked up, his amber eyes meeting the man's. It was as if he understood, as if he too felt the fragility of their situation. With a soft cough, he stood, his body towering protectively over the baby. The man faced the small cabin, formulating a plan. There had to be a way to get the baby to safety. He thought of the nearest town, miles away through dense forest. The journey would be treacherous, but staying here was not an option. "I'll need supplies," he said, glancing at the scattered remnants of the cabin's previous occupants. There wasn't much, some rusted tools, a moth-eaten blanket, and a few empty jars. But it would have to. He grabbed the tools, testing their weight. One of them, a heavy wrench, would serve as a weapon if needed. Hunter padded over his nose, brushing against the man's hand. The touch was reassuring, grounding. "Yeah, I know," the man said, with a faint smile. "We'll figure it out together." As they prepared to leave, the baby let out a soft cry. Hunter immediately turned his head, tilting as he assessed the child's needs. The man knelt beside them, picking up the baby carefully. "Shh, it's okay," he murmured, rocking it gently. The crying subsided, but the baby's small whimper stuck at his heart. "We need to move fast," he said, looking at Hunter. "I don't think this little one can handle another cold night out here." Hunter barked softly in agreement, his tail wagging once. Before he turned toward the door, the man adjusted the makeshift sling fashioned from a tattered blanket, cradling the baby against his chest with one hand, the wrench in the other, steadying the child. He opened the door. The air outside was crisp and still, the forest bathed in soft morning light. Hunter stepped out first, his nose to the ground and his ears alert. The man followed, his eyes scanning the tree line for any signs of movement. The path ahead was uneven, littered with fallen branches and patches of slick mud. Every step was a challenge, but they pressed on, driven by the need to find safety. As they moved deeper into the forest, the man began to notice subtle changes. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining overhead to form a natural canopy. The air was cooler here, the light dimmer. It felt both protective and foreboding, as if the forest itself were watching their every move. Hunter's pace quickened his instincts, leading him forward. He stopped occasionally, sniffing the ground and the air. Before continuing, the man trusted him completely, knowing the dog's senses were far sharper than his own. After an hour of walking, they came upon a small stream. The water was clear, trickling over smooth stones. The man knelt beside it, lowering the baby carefully onto a patch of dry moss. He cued his hands, scooping up water and bringing it to his lips. The cool liquid was refreshing, a momentary reprieve from the exhaustion weighing him down. Hunter drank as well, his tongue lapping up the water in eager gulps. When he was done, he turned his attention to the baby, nudging it. Blanket gently, the man smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude for the dog's unwavering care. "Wait, lucky to have you," he said, scratching behind Hunter's ears. The dog leaned into the touch, his eyes closing briefly in contentment. But the moment of peace was short-lived. A sudden rustling in the bushes nearby sent both man and dog into high alert. Hunter's ears perked and he let out a low growl. His body tensing, the man grabbed the wrench. His grip tightened as he scanned the area still close. He whispered, positioning himself between the sound and the beating. The rustling grew louder, closer. Hunter stepped forward, his teeth bared in a silent warning. The man's heart raced, his muscles coiled and ready. When a figure emerged from the underbrush, it wasn't a predator, but a woman disheveled and breathless, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. She froze when she saw them, her gaze darting from the man to the dog and finally to the baby. "Please," said her voice trembling, "I'm not here to hurt you. I saw the smoke from your cabin and thought maybe someone could help." Hunter's growl softened, but his posture remained guarded. The man lowered the wrench slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. She looked exhausted, her clothes torn and dirty, but there was something sincere in her expression, a desperation that mirrored his own. "What do you need?" he asked. Cautiously, the woman glanced back over her shoulder, her body trembling. "There's something out there. I've been running all night. Please, I just need a safe place to rest." Hunter stepped closer to the man, his nose brushing against his leg. The man sighed, glancing down at the baby. "Alright," he said finally, "but if you try anything, I won't." She interrupted, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I promise." The man nodded, motioning for her to follow as they continued down the path. Hunter stayed close, his eyes never leaving the stranger. The man's thoughts raced uncertainly through him. He didn't trust her completely, but for now, they had no choice but to move forward together. The group pressed onto the forest and uneasy silence. Hunter walked close to the man, his powerful frame shaping the baby while his sharp eyes flickered. Toward the woman every so often, she stayed a few paces behind the group, careful as though she didn't want to alarm the dog. The man broke the silence. "First, what your name, Leah?" she answered, quietly glancing at him before. Looking down at her feet, I was hiking with the group, but we got separated. Then her voice trailed off, her eyes darting nervously toward the dense trees around them. Something was chasing me. Hunter's ears perked up at the words, his gaze sweeping the forest as though confirming her story. "What kind of something?" The man pressed his tone sharp. "I don't know, well, I admitted, shaking her head. "I didn't see it clearly, just eyes in the dark and the sound. It was fast, and it didn't stop." Her voice trembled when she crossed her arms as though trying to ward off the man. The man exchanged a glance with Hunter, who gave a soft howl, as if in agreement. He adjusted the baby, sling, his protective instincts flaring stronger. "We'll deal with it. It comes back," said his voice firm. "But right now we'll keep moving." Leela nodded, quickening her pace to match theirs. As the morning wore on, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees grew taller, The trunks thicker and the canopy denser, blotting out much of the sunlight. The path was uneven with gnarled roots and jagged rocks, forcing them to tread carefully every sound. The crackle of branches, the distant chirp of birds felt amplified, adding to the tension. Hunter suddenly stopped his breath, stiffening a deep guttural growl rumbled in his throat. As he stared into the shadows ahead, the man curled his hand, tightening around the bench. "What is it?" he whispered. Lila's eyes widened. She clutched the tree trunk for "So what is it then?" She asked, her voice barely audible. The forest seemed to hold its breath, lengthening a low, eerie howl followed by another. The sound echoed closer with each repetition. Hunter's growl deepened at his throat whistled. The man's heart pounded, relaxed, and stayed close to him. He wanted positioning himself, turning the approaching threat. Hunter stepped forward, his stance fierce and unyielding. From the shadows, a pair of glowing yellow eyes appeared, followed by another and another wolves. The sleek forms emerged from the trees, muscles rippling under the thick coats. They moved with predatory grace, their eyes locked on the group. The man raised a wrench, his jaw clenched. "We don't want trouble," he muttered, knowing his words meant nothing. To the animals he glanced down at the baby, then at Hunter. "Protect them." Hunter didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, placing himself directly between the wolves and the others. His growl was low and menacing, warning. The lead wolf, larger than the others, snarled in response, its knuckles raised. The man crouched low, his free arm extending to shield Elala. "If they rush us round," he told her, his voice tight, "I'll hold them off." Ella shook her head gently. "I'm not leaving." The wolves advanced slowly, their movements calculated. The lead wolf lunged first, snapping his jaws many inches from Hunter's face. The dog reacted instantly, making the wolf head on with a powerful strike at his tail. The two animals clashed, snarling and snapping their brows, finished the forest. The other wolves hesitated for a moment before circling their sharp eyes, assessing the man and Lila. One darted forward, aiming for the baby, but the man swung the wrench with all his strength. The metal connected with a sickening crack, sending the wolf yelping back into the shadows. Hunter fought fiercely, his powerful jaws locking onto the lean wolf's shoulder. The two animals rolled, a blur of coral and flame, as the other wolves flanked him despite his exhaustion. Hunter moved with precision, his strikes calculated and devastating. The man swung the wrench again, narrowly missing another wolf. "Elala, take the baby," he shouted, thrusting his sling toward her. What she gasped, her face filled with fear. "Take it and go. I'll hold them off." Allah hesitated, but the urgency in his voice left no room for argument. She grabbed the sling, cradling the baby protectively against her chest. "I'll wait for you," she cried, tears streaming down her face as she stumbled backward. Hunter, now battling two wolves at once, let out a fierce bark, his determination unyielding. The man stepped forward, positioning himself beside the dog. "You're not doing this alone, buddy," he muttered. Together they fought back, their movements synchronized as though they had been partners for years. The wolves snarled and snapped their numbers, giving them an advanced edge. But Hunter and the man held their ground. Blow by blow they forced the pack to retreat, their growls turning to whimpers as they disappeared back into the trees. The forest fell silent again, save for the ragged breaths of man and dog. Hunter's body trembled with exhaustion, fresh scratches marring his coat. The man knelt beside him, his hand resting on the dog's heaving side. "You did it, boy," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Hunter licked his hand, once a gesture of gratitude and camaraderie. "Ella" appeared from the shadows, the baby still cradled in her arms. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're fine," the man said, though his body RHG with every movement thanks to him. Hunter nudged the man gently, his eyes scanning the forest one last time before relaxing. The wolves were gone for now, but the danger was far from over. "We need to move," the man said, pushing himself to his feet. "This place isn't safe anymore." Allah nodded, her grip on the baby tightening. Together they began to walk. Hunter limping slightly, but determined to stay at the man's side. The bond between them had deepened, forged in the fire of survival. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Night had fallen completely, cloaking the forest. In an impenetrable darkness broken only by the faint shimmer of starlight filtering through the branches, Hunter moved cautiously, his breath labored but resolute, the baby wet snugly in the blanket protecting it from the cold. Slept peacefully, Clara and the ranger followed closely behind their flashlights, casting beams that illuminated the uneven path ahead. Every step felt heavier with fatigue mounting and the biting chill growing ever sharper. Hunter slowed his pace, occasionally glancing back to ensure. The group stayed together. Clara noticed how the dog's head remained high, muscles coiled like taut wires. He's tracking something, she whispered to the ranger. Maybe he's found another trail. Suddenly Hunter froze, a low growl rumbled in his chest, his ears standing at full attention. Clara, the rangers stopped in their tracks, scanning the dark forest around them. Something's out there, the ranger said, gripping his flashlight tightly and searching. The movement among the shadows, a sharp crack pierced the silence, the sound of a snapping branch followed by rustling in the bushes. Hunter crouched head low, his growl deepening as a warning. Clara clutched the baby closer, her heart pounding. Could it be another animal, she murmured, trying to calm herself. But when a shadowy figure stepped out from the thicket, their fears took shape. It was a man, his face obscured by a tattered hood, his hands stuck into the pockets of a worn jacket. His eyes were cold and calculating, his mouth curling into a menacing grin. Lost in the woods are we, he said, his voice sending chills down their spines. The ranger stepped forward, raising his flashlight to get a better look at the stranger's face. Who are you and what do you want? He demanded, his voice steady but guarded. The man took a step closer, ignoring the question. It's not every day you come across such a well-trained dog and an abandoned baby. Seems like you've got something that might interest me. Hunter's growl grew louder as he positioned himself firmly in front of Clara and the child, his body a living shield. The ranger quickly assessed the threat and prepared to act. We don't know who you are, but we're not looking for trouble, he said firmly. The stranger chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. You don't get to decide whether there's trouble, he replied, gesturing behind him. Two more figures emerged from the darkness, both armed with knives and wearing equally unsettling expressions. Clara held her breath, clutching the baby protectively. The ranger stepped closer to Hunter, ready for whatever was about to happen. We're not looking for a fight, he said, keeping his voice calm. But the tension in the air was thick, and a confrontation seemed inevitable. Hunter didn't wait for them to make the first move. With a sudden explosive leap, he lunged at the nearest man. Hunter's sudden attack was a blur of movement. His powerful body collided with the first man, knocking him off balance and sending him crashing to the ground. The man let out a startled yell as Hunter's jaws clamped down on his forearm, forcing him to drop his knife. The other two men reacted quickly. One lunged toward Hunter with his knife raised, while the other made a move toward Clara and the baby. The ranger stepped forward, intercepting the second man with a forceful shove, causing him to stumble backward into a tree. Stay back, the ranger shouted, his voice echoing. Through the forest, Hunter meanwhile shifted his position to avoid the swipe of the knife. From the third man, the blade narrowly missed him, slicing through the air just above his head. With a deep guttural growl, Hunter launched himself again, his teeth and his strength unwavering. Despite his exhaustion, his ferocity seemed to catch the attackers off guard, their initial confidence giving way to hesitation. Clara, clutching the baby tightly, backed away toward the nearest tree, her heart racing as she tried to shield the child from the chaos. She could hear the sounds of the scuffle, the sharp growls, the grunts of effort, and the dull thud of body is hitting the ground. She glanced toward the ranger, who was grappling with one of the men, using every ounce of strength to keep him at bay. Hunter's relentless attacks began to turn the tide. The man he had first tackled was now on his knees, clutching his injured arm and retreating slowly into the shadows. The second attacker, visibly shaken, hesitated as he watched. The dog overpowered his companion. You're going to regret this. The third man snarled, his knife trembling slightly in his grip as he faced Hunter. But before he could make another move, Hunter lunged again, his jaws snapping. dangerously close to the man's leg, forcing him to drop the weapon in panic. The ranger took advantage of the distraction, delivering a solid punch to the man he was fighting, sending him sprawling onto the forest floor, bleeding heavily. The ranger turned toward Clara. "Are you okay?" he called out, his voice edged with concern. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face as she cradled the baby. "We're okay," she managed to say, her voice trembling with two of the attackers now retreating into the woods, and the third incapacitated. The immediate danger seemed to subside. Hunter stood tall, his chest heaving, as he watched the remaining threats disappear into the darkness. His fur was matted with blood and his muscles quivered from the effort, but his unwavering determination had carried them through. The ranger moved to Hunter's side, placing a hand gently on the dog's shoulder. "You saved us," he said, his voice filled with gratitude and admiration. Hunter let out a low whine, his eyes briefly meeting Clara's before shifting back to the forest. His ears still perked and alert even in victory. He remained vigilant, ready to defend his newfound family against any further threats. As the forest fell into an uneasy silence, Clara clutched the baby tightly, her heart racing from the encounter. The ranger knelt beside Hunter, inspecting the dog's wounds. Though shallow, they were a testament to the battle he had fought to protect them too. "You're one tough dog," the ranger murmured, patting Hunter. Gently, the victory was short-lived, as a new sound emerged from the darkness. It started faintly, branches snapping, leaves crunching, and grew louder with each passing second. A chilling howl echoed through the trees, followed by another and another. Clara's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "Wolf," the ranger said, his voice low but urgent. "Fapaka," and the close hunter's ears shot up, and he let out a deep, warning growl, his body tensed, exhaustion momentarily forgotten. As he stepped in front of Clara and the baby, the ranger retrieved his flashlight, its beam sweeping across the trees. Yellow eyes glinted in the distance. "The wolves already circling. We need to move. Now." The ranger urged, his voice steady, despite the growing tension. But moving wasn't an option. Clara was frozen with fear, the baby stirring restlessly in her arms. Hunter positioned himself firmly between them and the approaching pack, his stance resolute. The wolves emerged from the shadows, their sleek forms moving with predatory grace. Their leader, larger than the rest, beat its teeth and let out a low growl, signaling its intent. The ranger picked up a sturdy branch and brandished it as a makeshift weapon. "Stay behind me," he instructed Clara, though he knew the odds were stacked against them. Hunter didn't wait for the wolves to attack with a fierce bark. He charged at the leader, his powerful jaws snapping. The sudden aggression took the wolves by surprise, but they quickly regrouped, their instincts driving them to surround him. Hunter's focus remained unbroken as he lunged at one wolf, clamping down on its hind leg and forcing it to retreat with a yelp. Another wolf leapt at Hunter's side, its teeth grazing his flank, but he twisted sharply and countered with a forceful blow. The pack each hesitated for a moment, wary of the dog's ferocity. Hunter's growls filled the air, a primal warning that he would fight to his last breath to protect those behind him. The leader of the pack advanced, its massive form looming over Hunter. The two locked eyes, a silent battle of wills. The wolf lunged, its jaws snapping inches from Hunter's neck. But Hunter darted to the side, using his momentum to throw the wolf off balance. The clash was fierce, a blur of fur and teeth, but Hunter's unyielding resolve gave him the edge. With a powerful strike, he sent the leader sprawling to the ground. The other wolves faltered, their confidence shaking without their leader's command. They snarled and circled but kept their distance, watching as Hunter stood tall, blooded but undeterred. His growls were a declaration he would not back down. The ranger seized the moment, waving the branch aggressively and shouting to drive the pack further back. "Oh, get out of here," he yelled, his voice echoing through the forest. Slowly, one by one, the wolves retreated, melting back into the shadows from which they came. Hunter stood still, his chest heaving as he watched the wolves disappear. The adrenaline began to fade, and his body trembled with exhaustion. Clara rushed forward, kneeling beside him. "Hunter, you saved us again," she whispered. her voice thick with emotion. The ranger placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. We need to get him to safety. He's hurt, but he's a fighter. He'll make it. Hunter let out a soft whine his head, resting against Clara's arm despite his injuries. There was a quiet pride in his eyes, a reflection of the bond he had forged with this fragile group. The baby stirred in Clara's arms, its tiny hand brushing against Hunter's fur. As if offering its own thanks, the group pressed on the cabin, now only a short distance away. Hunter limped but stayed alert, his senses attuned to any lingering dangers. When they finally reached the small structure, relief washed over them. The walls, though worn and weathered, promised a sanctuary, a place to finally rest inside. Clara laid the baby gently on a pile of blankets while the ranger tended to Hunter's wounds. You're incredible, the ranger said softly, cleaning a gash on Hunter's side. I've never seen a dog with such courage. Hunter closed his eyes, his body relaxing for the first time since the journey began. Clara sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his fur. You're not just a hero, Hunter, she whispered. Your family, as dawn broke over the forest, golden light filtered through the cracks in the cabin's wooden walls. Clara woke to the gentle sound of birdsong and the soft sing of the baby for the first time in what felt like an eternity. There was peace. She looked over at Hunter lying near the baby, his chest rising and falling steadily. Despite the exhaustion etched into his body, there was a calmness about him, a quiet victory in his amber eyes. The ranger entered the cabin carrying a small first aid kit and a fresh blanket. How's our hero? He asked, nodding toward Hunter. Clara smiled, faintly tired but still standing. He's incredible. Hunter perked up slightly at their voices, his ears twitching as he shifted his gaze. Between them, the ranger knelt beside him, carefully checking. The bandages he'd applied the night before. You've earned your rest, big guy, he murmured, scratching behind Hunter's ear. Clara cradled the baby, who gurgled softly, its tiny hand reaching out. She brought the child closer to Hunter, letting it touch the dog's fur. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, she said softly, her voice breaking with emotion. Hunter responded with a gentle huff, his tail wagging faintly against the floor. By mid-morning. The sound of vehicles in the distance broke the forest stillness. Sarah's heart quickened as she heard voices calling out search and rescue. Someone shouted, their tone urgent. The ranger stepped outside, waving toward the team of rescuers. Approaching the cabin, they arrived in a flurry of activity, their radios crackling and boots crunching against the dirt. One of the medics rushed to Clara, checking her and the baby. You're safe now, the medic assured her. We'll get you both taken care of. Clara held on to the baby tightly, tears streaming down her face. Be okay because of him, she said, motioning to Hunter. The rescuers turned their attention to the dog, their expressions shifting to awe. This dog protected you out here, one asked P, kneeling to examine Hunter. The ranger nodded, recounting the harrowing encounters with the wolves and the journey through the forest as the medics prepared to transport Clara and the baby. She hesitated, looking down at Hunter. What about him? He has to come with us, she said. Firmly, one of the rescuers smiled. Don't worry, he's coming with us. A dog like this deserves a hero's welcome back in the safety of civilization. Hunter's story quickly spread. News outlets and social media lit up with tales of the calm, savage stray who had risked everything to protect a helpless child. Donations poured in for his care, and people from all over the world expressed their gratitude and admiration. At the veterinary clinic, Hunter received the treatment he needed, though his body bore scars from his past life and the recent battles. His spirit remained unbroken. Clara visited him every day, the baby always in tow. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing moment. A week later, Clara stood outside the clinic, nervously fidgeting with her hands. When the doors opened, Hunter trotted out, his tail wagging enthusiastically. His wounds had healed, and his once weary eyes now shone with vitality. Clara knelt, throwing her arms around him. You're coming home with us, she whispered. Month Deed and Hunter settled into his new life with Clara and the baby gone were the days of wandering aimlessly through the forest, driven by hunger and survival. Now he had a family, a purpose, his once guarded heart softened. Filled with the warmth of love and belonging, Claire often watched in amazement as Hunter and the baby played together. The child would giggle as Hunter gently nudged toys toward it or allowed tiny hands to tug on his ears. "You're more than just a protector," she'd say to him, "your family." One sunny afternoon, Clara sat on the porch, the baby in her lap as Hunter lay nearby, basking in the warmth. She reached over, running her hand through his fur. "You saved us in every way," she said softly. Hunter turned his head, his gaze meeting hers with a look of understanding. Hunter's story became a symbol of resilience and loyalty. The town celebrated him as a local hero, even holding a small ceremony in his honor. But for Clara and the baby, he was much more than that. He was their guardian, their companion, and a constant reminder of the power of love. As the years went by, the bond between them only deepened. Hunter aged gracefully, his once powerful frame slowing but never losing its strength of spirit. On quiet evenings, Clara would sit with him, reminiscing about their incredible journey. And when the baby, now a toddler, would fall asleep nestled against Hunter's side, Clara would smile, knowing they were exactly where they were meant to be. Together as a family. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join us for more incredible tales of resilience, love, and loyalty. And as always, thank you for being part of our story.